Welcome everyone, this is Morning Tiofi, and today we're going to talk about how to use VS Code to debug and configure on Python. Right, so first we're going to talk about how to create a launch JSON, which is the VS Code requirement to actually debug your script, and also the place that you configure all the settings to run your debugger. Right, so we're going to learn how to configure launch JSON, right, and how to put breakpoints to how to navigate the call stack, right, how to read what's in the code and variables. Okay, and we want to be able to watch some variables, how to interact with the debugger. Okay, so that's actually quite a lot of topic to cover, right? So first we're going to talk about how to create a launch JSON, how to configure it, how to put the breakpoints, how to navigate the call stack, how to read what's in the code and the variables, watch some variables. So we talk about a bit about like watching, how to watch variables, and mainly how to interact with debugger. So all those are actually the very basics. We'll keep this as simple as short as possible, and I will show you where to get the resources to read up more on this, right? So basically I have this project, it's actually the open source Great Expectations, and we want to debug some code, or actually understand how the code base work, right? So to debug, first we have to go about run and debug, click onto this, and we have to create a launch JSON, right? Hit onto Python, and we want to debug a Python file actually, just to demo.py, right? Okay, now we have this. So what we're gonna do and what is this about, right? It's just a basic configuration, right? So some of the most simple way of like configuring this mode, you definitely need a Python, right? So this Python is actually the Python that you're gonna use to run this debug script. So if for example I using a virtual environment, I will use point this to my virtual environment Python tree, right? So in this case, I have already configured this into the interpreter path. And if you are using a virtual environment that is not in this directory or not configured, I mean, you can always just kind of hard code it, right? Just wish Python and then copy over. Okay, some cool stuff you can do is that I can actually omit this and do dollar workspace folder. So what is this workspace folder, right? The path of the folder open in VS Code. So this is actually the path of the folder that is open in VS Code. So for example, I'm opening my project in directly to Great Expectations in the root, right? So this Great Expectation is my path project, and then I'm looking at my virtual environment here, which is in the Python tree or Python in bin binary. So we're gonna do just that. Okay, and program is the file that you want to debug. You can look about what $sign file do as well. Always go to the hinting. You can actually see that it's this one, the current open file, but in this case I want to point it to demo.py. So what we can do as well is to right click, be relative path. We're gonna put this here, and as usual I will choose to specify the full path slash, right? So what are the other values? Now we got the Python that I want to use to run these two more keywords to learn, which is CWD, stands for current work directory. Okay, just do just that. Link to the workspace that folder, you can configure it to link to somewhere else, right? And then you can run the relative path thing from that directory. So normally if you need this, you can have it as well. If not, it will be configured to the workspace folder. Next, we're gonna have environment variables, which is env. We can look at what's environment variable defined as a key value pair. Okay, we'll just do just that. Put hello VSCODE. Cool. Next, we're gonna talk about how I actually know all these, right? And how to know more about VS Code. Learn more, right? You can actually just look at this. For more information, visit this path. So you can control click the link. It'll bring you up to the debugging in VS Code. And I just want you to draw your attention to variable substitutions. You can read about these as you go on like you want to do a particular thing on debug action, breakpoints, how should you go about doing it, and you can read more about it here, but I just want to draw your attention to this variable substitution. And then we would like to click about variable reference, right? So when click into this, so what do we have here? All the predefined variables, fine, and the explanation. So we have seen some familiar faces here: CWD, workspace folder, file. We talk about all this, right? And the rest, if you want, you can read up more on it. And then in this case, we are debugging Python. So let's look at Python. So install the interpreter, fine. We already have this, configuring the interpreter. Okay, running the script. So now go to debugging, and you see something even more familiar, talking about the launch script, how to configure for Python. Okay, let's draw your attention to set configuration options, right? And what kind of configuration options am I able to add for Python debugging? You can see that for program, what does program do? For module, we will talk about this in a separate video. Python and the interpreter path, how to configure and pass in arguments. So this is actually quite important and quite oftenly used. So you can see that you can just pass in easily like this, right? So just to copy and just to illustrate. So actually I can just put it like this, right? And then when I run this Python script, it will pass in these variables in this format as well, right? For example, I want to run at this port, so that's what I'm gonna do. But in this case, this is all I need, and let's start debugging. We're gonna do some debugging, right? And the first thing that we want to come about is to actually run it in debug mode and want the script to pause at some point in time. And how am I gonna do it? Alright, we need to put a pause, right? So that's what is called in the coding world, right? It's called a breakpoint, right? You can breakpoint here, so you can look at how to configure, add a function breakpoint, toggle active breakpoint, and remove a breakpoint. But essentially what you need to do, we'll go through, start with the very basic, is that I want to go to my script. I've printed my environment hello Delphi that we have configured earlier, right? I want to put one breakpoint here, right? And let's get started and see how it works. So to run the script, Python environment and the debugger, you can just click onto this. If you have multiple configured, it will be this drop down list, right? But we only have one configured, which is the Python current file. And how does this name come about? Go back to here. It's actually coming from here, right? So TLP demo, save it, got configured. Okay, let's run it. So the hotkey for this is F5, and you can see that my debugger start running, right? How do I know that I'm actually in the debugger mode? right? My terminal is configured to Python debugger, which is the Python debug console. Alright, and just to share with you some of the things that I can see here, which is the most commonly used is the debug console. Over here, right, you can type actually anything that's in Python, correct? And at the same time, I'm able to find out what this is at this point of time, right? For example, I want to know what's in context, right? I can see what's context. I can see what's inside context as well, right? What's inside context, what are the function and class, right? So this is pretty handy and pretty cool. And at the same time, I can always mouse over as well to know more, to have a quick look about, oh, my base directory is actually here. I'm referencing this YAML file, fine. And actually stopping here, right? I can't actually see anything after this because I'm putting a stop here, right? So that's one thing to take note for Python. And at the same time, I can explore more of my variables. So we talk about like context. I'm pretty sure we can find context here. So we found it here, right? Context. And at the same time, we can see all the similar things that we have seen here by like hovering over. So we can right click and add to watch as well. So what does watch do, right? So you remove the watch by clicking the X, mousing over and clicking the X. So what does watch do? So as your script runs, this thing might change and you just want to watch this variable if it changes, right? So that's pretty cool as well and useful. Okay, so now I'm like debugging and maybe I found out that I just want to learn or understand how this program runs, or I just want to debug a particular place before it crashes, right? So in this case, when it crashes, you have like kind of a debug logging or the line that it actually crashed, and you can actually go there and put a breakpoint. So for example, I'm going to this function script and I just want to put a breakpoint here, right? Because I just want to understand the script better, or I'm just debugging at some point of time what are the variables that are actually being passed in. I can actually look from here. So we can resume the program from here. Normally, as a start, just ignore every button. It might look very intimidating. You can know that the square red button is stop, the restart the whole debugger, and then press play, right? The rest you can learn as you progress. Oh, and then we are here. Cool. We are in this private class function. That is a static method. Okay, and I can actually mouse over and find out what's being passed in, right? I can even double click it, copy paste it here, and see what's inside, right? If I'm lazy to refer from here, I actually can print it out. I actually can print it out and say, what is the first value in the list? It's actually a dictionary, and what's inside the dictionary. I actually can see the data structure, and it's a lot easier for a beginner to pick up a new program, a new code base for sure, right? And at the same time, you can see that you mouse over and it's much easier to read. And for example, if I have any, like, let's say I'm at colon_type, right? I'm already here and I would like to put a breakpoint here just to understand that this colon type, what is it actually about, what can I do with it here. And you can see that it's actually a double, right? It's a string and it's a double. And you can maybe try something like, maybe I want to split, right? And you realize that it doesn't work. So you will notice that it works as expected. Like there's an empty separator, right? This debug console is like your Python console, and the Python console is actually at this point of time able to draw out all these contexts and all these variables for you to debug. So okay, put it here. Right, there we go. You see, we can actually make this interactive and actually see how the variable can transform, and when you use a particular function, what is the output. It makes your life a lot easier. Cool. Now we can remove this, and I want to draw your point to the call stack. So what is the call stack, right? The call stack, you might think that it's quite complicated. Actually it's just like layer after another layer in layman term. So you can see that my code is here, right? And then my previous code, where did my previous code come from? It actually comes from here. So this code, right, actually got executed, and it points to this, which is where is my breakpoint. So naturally you find that if I trace it back, right, I can actually know that where is the code calling each function from. So if you want to name it, this is in a descending order in a very layman term, right? And you can actually trace it back from the bottom all the way to the up. So alright, trace it back all the way down, and I can see that it actually runs from my demo.py. Wow. So this is like the powerful part of VS Code, right? You can actually see where to each part of the code is calling and how does the function get invoked. So that's one strong point about VS Code, right? I don't want to talk about other threads. This is too complicated. Let's keep this simple. And the next thing I want to talk about is breakpoints. So breakpoints, basically it just depends on like how many breakpoints you put, right? And then if you want to deactivate a particular breakpoint, but you don't want to remove it, if you want to remove it, you can just click onto this, right? But in this case, I want to deactivate it. You can click on the tick, right? And it actually unshade the value. So yeah, I mean it's not very prominent, but you can see the shading that is actually changes here. Alright, so that's how you navigate with your breakpoints. And if you want to remove or temporarily deactivate our breakpoints, you can click onto this, and remove breakpoints, you can click onto that. So that's pretty much you need to learn about the VS Code and how to interact and debug your Python script. So I hope that you have learned something useful today. I will try to keep this as simple as possible and as easy as possible for you. Thank you so much for watching this video. Have fun.